We're beginning to see that information technology is not something that is innocent or neutral. It is not a medium through which information passes. It actually shapes and changes the way that we think about ourselves in the world through the way that it forces us to make responses to it. This is difficult and a problem because what it is doing is forcing us to share information about ourselves that would cause psychoanalysts, it would take them decades to figure out things about ourselves or to unearth things about ourselves. The data, this is then sharing it with vested interests who market, use, and exploit this personal information that we believe we have innocently shared with other people and been conditioned to give away openly and freely. It's giving it to people who can then use it essentially against democratic interests and against the idea that you're in a way that exploits you by exposing weaknesses that you don't even know that you have yourself. If you look back at the BBC short video that explained the Cambridge Analytica scandal, they're saying that the algorithms that are used to mine and assess the information that you're openly sharing creates a deeper level of knowledge about you than you may have yourself. And it's not unusual that we're many of us don't have the opportunity to develop a deep sense of knowledge when we're busy about ourselves, when we're busy doing many other things. But what this is saying is that these algorithms know you much better than the people you work closely with does. These are people we spend time with who can, get an insight into who we are when we're under pressure. They know more about you than your parents know about you. And interestingly, that based on the way that you use social media, the amount of likes, the amount of comments that you make on things, it can give you more insight into you and your personality than your life partner, much more than they will ever get. So essentially what happens then is this information is taken away and it's taken away and used to inform the packaging of information that will then resell viewpoints to you that you otherwise would not have held. This is essentially mind control. There was a movie came out a couple of years ago, kids movie called Incredibles 2, and in it, spoiler alert, there is the villain in it is a supervillain known as Screenslaver. And this is somebody who is able to take over the minds of the individuals who it sees looking at particular screens. This is exactly what is happening with in surveillance capitalism. With this form of data valence, we're sharing information in an innocent way. People who we haven't given permission to use it or exploit it are taking it and selling it on to vested interests who want to control our behaviors, our attitudes, and ultimately our values. What can we do about this? One of the first things we can do is look into the field of data governance, and related to this is GDPR. We can look at the way that we design services and IT offerings to a thing called privacy by design. We can look at societal marketing, and we can return to information literacy. Information literacy, as you know, is something that we've already encountered in the CA for this course by using the radar approach and the radar tool. I'm going to go back to that because I think sometimes people might interpret what the purpose and the function of radar is. First of all, we're looking at data governance. The four letters that have come to dominate or came to dominate over the last 18 months or so, the working lives of people, is GDPR, and this stands for the general this excuse me, the General Data Protection Regulation. And the General Data Protection Regulation, it's been in force since for the last almost for 2 years now. And it was introduced to replace existing data protection acts. The UK will implement twice there. They'll attempt to implement it in principle, and they're going to tailor it to accommodate security concerns once Brexit is done. And Brexit isn't done, despite what people were saying, that it's a longer process than people might actually imagine. The regulation means that this applies directly to all member states, so they don't need to develop their own laws. In fact, as said there already, that it replaces the variation between different data protection acts that already exist. And the concern is to, I suppose, primarily to look at how personal data is used in the modern digital world. It's to regulate the usage of this information, and you can probably see how how many of the case that we just looked at in the previous video on YouTube is the need for this, is the idea that there is a that by breaching somebody's data rights, you're actually breaching their personal privacy, and it's led to levels of crime such as identity theft. As it might impact you and you as an individual. Hopefully, this won't have happened to you. This is somebody stealing your information, impersonating you, perhaps stealing resources that are of use to your buying things with your credit card. It's a form of fraud. The way it impacts on organizations is that they can be misrepresented, and this happens frequently with banks who are when, say, you might have more kind of data naive people who may not be familiar with the use of personal technologies or mobile technologies, receiving emails claiming to be somebody from a financial institution and accessing people's information from it and unscrupulously emptying their bank accounts. It's a very difficult thing to catch the people who have done it. Fraud, which is claiming that you have individuals who claim that they have they might even extort information out of people just to spam emails claiming that they can intimate that the individual has has committed a crime or whatever, and this can damage. This of course has negative impacts on both of these have negative impacts on people who are both customers and on companies. Just for companies as well, it can damage customer confidence in the brands that are involved. If your company has been subjected to a large scale hack, this makes your customers nervous about having been a customer with you. And in terms of brand identity, this is not what's required. GDPR is actually much tougher than existing data protection acts right throughout the EU. It is quite severe in the penalties that it brings down on organizations who do not comply with it or don't attempt to comply to it, in the form of fines of up to 20 million or 4% of the organization or group's annual turnover, whichever is greater. And individuals who take legal action against companies that have allowed their data rights to be infringed they have much stronger rights under GDPR to sue. Again, this is something that places is a huge concern for companies. So what you're seeing here is an unequivocal transfer of data privacy, of the power to take action against companies who breach data privacy laws. This is putting a lot more power into the hands of individuals, and is in turn making changing the legal framework in which these data privacy rights and ethics actually lives. So this puts pressure directly back onto organizations and businesses to take these seriously. it prescribes the general data protection regulation. I mean, there are lots of EU regulations that are out there that it'd be wrong to say that they obliterate, or they do away with national laws, but because they're developed in through a framework that is conscious of the of every EU country's legislative framework that it has in a particular area, but it looks at it and it looks at the critiques of it and it tries to apply this right across the board in relation to whatever it's looking at. So, for example, recently there has been a new whistleblowing regulation that's much stronger than some countries have strong whistleblowing levels of whistleblowing regulation, other ones don't. This one is one that comes in and actually really takes stronger steps to enshrine the rights of a whistleblower. And sometimes companies are under pressure from various interest groups are are forced to withdraw or to lessen the amount of to weaken their legislation in this space. When it comes from the EU, there's less likely to be this pressure is less likely to be exerted, which means that the regulations can be quite stronger. So if we look at what GDPR and that regulation, for example, it says it enshrines different roles. A data subject is a living person whose personal data is processed. So it's not an adult. It's not somebody, under the age of 65. It's every single person whose personal data is processed is a data subject. A data controller is the name of an organization or an individual responsible for determining why and how to process personal data. So you can't say it's not my responsibility. It's somebody has made a decision. An individual or an organization is a person who's made a decision about this. And as a decision maker, as a manager, this is what your responsibility is for. So a data processor is the organization or an individual then who does this work on behalf of the data controller. A data protection officer is a person within an organization who has been given responsibility to make sure that the organization is compliant with GDPR. A supervisory authority is a national data protection authority that enforces GDPR. And that's really important because it means that it gives GDPR teeth at a national level. It gets rid of levels of bureaucracy. It means that if you have an issue with how your data has been used, you can track out who this you can go directly to this person and track them down. Track them down and make a direct complaint to them, and you're more likely to get immediate action as a result of that complaint. In Ireland, this work is done by the Data Protection Commission. There is a head Data Protection Commissioner, and the Data Protection Commissioner in Ireland is currently a lady known as Helen Dixon. And the Data Protection Commissioner has 7 deputy commissioners who are heads of various regulatory areas, legal areas, etc. You can see who that is in their organisation chart and the amount of staff that they have available to them. So there is an established body who takes care of this work for the organisation. For Ireland, and there are equivalents in every European country as well. So this means that if you look at where this is, there's a lot of different things that are at play at the moment. What this does is it gives at the very top part here, the supervisory authority, the Data Protection Commission and the Data Protection Commissioner in Ireland, there's somebody who anybody, regardless of what their engagement is with any form of organisation, can go to if they have a concern about their fundamental data rights and it being violated in an unethical way.